Hello and welcome to Firstpost America. I'm Eric Hammond. We're live in the nation's capital, Washington, D.C. And over the next few minutes, we'll take you from the United States and around the world, covering all the top stories of the day. But before that, here's a look at the latest headlines. Israel orders its army to prepare a plan to allow the departure of Palestinians from Gaza. This after President Trump announced that the United States would take over the Gaza Strip to rebuild it. Malawi withdraws its troops from the peacekeeping mission in the Democratic Republic of Congo hours after the M23 rebels and the Rwandan army launched a new offensive. This after Malawans pressured their president to withdraw from the war zone after several of its troops were killed in recent days. Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba to become the second foreign leader to meet President Donald Trump since his re-election. The Japanese leader is expected to sign a major defense deal with the United States on the 7th of February. The Trump administration claims that the U.S. government-owned vessels now have free passage through the Panama Canal and will not have to pay a transit fee. However, Panama denies adjusting transit fees for American vessels. And South Korea bans Chinese AI DeepSeek, citing national security concerns. South Korea now joins India, Italy, Australia, Taiwan, and the United States in implementing varying levels of bans and blocks on DeepSeek. We begin in the United States, where tens of thousands of protesters took to the streets against the Trump administration on Wednesday. The demonstrations came as people decried the White House's early actions, including immigration crackdowns, rollbacks on gender rights, and tariffs on allied nations. The protests were the result of a movement that was organized under the hashtags Build the Resistance and 50501, which stands for 50 Protests, 50 States, One Day. The largest protest took place in California, Oregon, Washington State, Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin, Indiana, New York, New Jersey, and Washington, D.C. The demonstrations were even seen in traditional red states like Texas, Alabama, Alaska, Missouri, and Ohio.
I feel like the movement is growing. I mean, we've only had to deal with him for the last 16 days. So I think people are waking up to what we're faced with and are going to be coming into the streets.
In 2016, we didn't know what he was really going to do in office, but now we know. And I don't know. I can't understand how he got elected. I can't understand how people are okay with this. And I hope that people will start to push back before it's too late.
Throughout cities including Atlanta, Boston, New York, and Philadelphia, protesters chanted slogans like "Death to Fascism," "Save Democracy," "No Human is Illegal," and "Impeach Trump."
This is what democracy looks like. Who's going to stop us? This is what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like.
The protesters also rallied against President Trump's closest ally, Elon Musk, with many holding signs calling for the deportation of the billionaire.
Elon Musk has got to go, hey, hey, ho, ho. Elon Musk has got to go, hey, hey, ho, ho. Elon Musk has got to go, hey, hey, ho, ho. Elon Musk has got to go, hey, hey.
We are witnessing in real time the most corrupt bargain in American history. Elon Musk paid over $250 million to help elect Donald Trump. And now Donald Trump is turning over the keys to the Treasury and the rest of the federal government to Elon Musk. We need to end this illegal power grab, and we are going to do it now. We are not going back.
Also, rally saw the participation of several Democratic leaders who urged the Trump administration to reconsider shutting down the U.S. Agency for International Development, or USAID. In fact, while accusing Elon Musk of calling the shots in the White House. Now, it hasn't even been a full month in office for President Trump, and he's already facing backlash, not just from political opposition, but from even ordinary Americans. And staying with President Trump, the commander-in-chief signed an executive order banning transgender athletes from participating in women's sports. The order signed on Wednesday has been titled "Keeping Men Out of Women's Sports." Now, apart from the ban, it also gives federal agencies the authority to only allocate resources for institutes that abide by the order.
Okay? Good. Now you're going to go out and win those events, right? Nice to see you all. Great going, everybody. With this executive order, the war on women's sports is over. Under the Trump administration, we will defend the proud tradition of female athletes, and we will not allow men to beat up, injure, and cheat our women and our girls. From now on, women's sports will be only for women.
The order also gives the Department of Education the power to investigate schools and colleges that do not comply. Federal funding will be halted to those schools where the Trump administration suspects institutions are not in compliance.
With my action this afternoon, we're putting every school receiving taxpayer dollars on notice that if you let men take over women's sports teams or invade your locker rooms, you will be investigated for violations of Title IX and risk your federal funding. There will be no federal funding.
Now, the latest order is part of President Trump's crackdown on what he calls woke gender ideology. In fact, Donald Trump has already signed multiple executive orders, including declaring that the U.S. only recognizes two genders, male and female, banning gender care and transition surgeries for minors, banning transgender people from the U.S. military, moving transgender women to men's prisons, and denying passport applications for gender-neutral people. Now, in addition to all of this, President Trump announced another restriction for the trans community on Wednesday, this time restricting entry to foreigners who identify as trans and want to compete in sports in the United States.
I'm also directing our Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, who's also she's out there with you, Greg, a fantastic job. She's unbelievable. I was watching her riding yesterday on a horse. She was as good as anybody. She's very good. To deny any and all visa applications made by men attempting to fraudulently enter the United States while identifying themselves as women athletes, try and get into the games maybe where they are unable to get into the games.
Now, it must be noted that the timing of the signing of the executive order also coincided with the National Girls and Women in Sports Day. However, with at least 5 executive orders targeting LGBTQ+ people already in place, one question remains: how much more will the president target members of a community that already face marginalization and discrimination? And now moving to South America, in a dramatic escalation of tensions with Venezuela, the Trump administration plans to seize a second aircraft belonging to Nicolas Maduro. The sleek Dassault Falcon 200 is parked in the Dominican Republic and has been grounded because of Washington sanctions.
No, we want to do something with Venezuela. I've been a very big opponent of Venezuela and Maduro. They've treated us not so good, but they've treated, more importantly, the Venezuelan people very badly. We have a tremendous Venezuelan population. I got 92% of the vote, the Venezuelan vote. Now we want to see what we can do to get people back in their homeland safe and free.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio is expected to announce the seizure in Santo Domingo later today, which is the final stop of his whirlwind 5-nation tour of Central America. Now, according to U.S. officials and documents from the State Department, the jet is more than just a luxury ride. In fact, it's ferried the Venezuelan president and his top brass to places like Russia, Turkey, Greece, and Cuba. And these trips blatantly violated sanctions meant to isolate the the Venezuelan leader's regime. But capturing Maduro's presidential plane hasn't been so simple. In fact, the operation required the Secretary of State to greenlight foreign aid worth $230,000 for the Dominican Republic to the Dominican Republic as the aircraft storage and maintenance fees continue to increase. Meanwhile, this is not the first time that Maduro's air fleet has in fact been clipped. Back in September of 2024, then President Joe Biden ordered the seizure of Maduro's presidential jet worth $13 million that was also nabbed in the Dominican Republic.
Dominican Foreign Ministry received a request for a Dassault Falcon 900X plane to be halted so U.S. authorities could register evidence and objects related to activities linked to fraud, objects smuggled for illegal activities, and money laundering. All of this was done within the framework of a criminal investigation carried out by the U.S. Justice Department.
But the jet seizure is only part of Secretary Rubio's broader mission across Central America. The Secretary's tours also saw him wading into one of South America's most heated territorial disputes, the battle over the Escalating region between Venezuela and Guyana. In fact, just last month, Secretary Rubio reaffirmed America's unwavering support for Guyana's claim over Esquivel, an oil-rich region that Venezuela has eyed for decades. And Maduro's foreign minister wasted no time in firing back, branding Secretary Rubio an enemy of Venezuela and accusing him of meddling in the country's sovereignty.
Rubio seeks to support the fantasies of the Guyanese government, which aims to strip us of the historic rights bequeathed to us by our liberators and which are an inalienable part of our sovereignty. The only legitimate and valid path to resolving the territorial controversy over the Guayana Essequibo is through compliance with the 1966 Geneva Agreement.
So as Secretary Rubio wraps up his tour, the message from Washington is clear. The U.S. is tightening the screws on Maduro's regime, one jet and one diplomatic maneuver at a time. And back to the United States, taxpayer outrage is erupting as USAID faces accusations of wasting public funds on several bizarre projects. President Trump and Elon Musk have launched a fiery crackdown calling the agency corrupt and inefficient. In fact, since last Monday, USAID offices have been shuttered. Employees are sidelined and the aid to critical global programs remain frozen. Meanwhile, critics warn of disastrous consequences for global health and humanitarian efforts if USAID doesn't resume its services. But the nation watches as the chaos unfolds. Our next report has more.
Protests shook Washington, D.C. as furious aid workers and activists swamped the streets. USAID saves lives, they shouted, slamming President Trump and his buddy Elon Musk for dismantling America's key lifeline to the world. United States Agency for International Development, or USAID.
With this, we are witnessing in real time the most corrupt bargain in American history. Elon Musk paid over $250 million to help elect Donald Trump. And now Donald Trump is turning over the keys to the Treasury and the rest of the federal government to Elon Musk. We need to end this illegal power grab, and we are going to do it now. We are not going back.
And it all began with Elon Musk's cost-cutting crusade. Tasked by President Donald Trump, Musk claimed USAID was a criminal organization. He accused it of wasting taxpayers' money, addressing them to be Viper's nest of radical left Marxists who hate America. And working on making the president's buddy happy, the Trump administration moved swiftly to freeze billions in foreign aid.
It's something that should have been done a long time ago. It went crazy during the Biden administration. They went totally crazy what they were doing and the money they were giving to people that shouldn't be getting it and to agencies and others that shouldn't be getting it. It was a shame. So they're tremendous fraud. But we'll be doing a report. We'll be giving you that report at the appropriate time.
The list of alleged spending shocked many. $50 million for condoms in Gaza. $1.5 million to promote diversity in Serbia, $47,000 on a transgender opera in Colombia, $32,000 for a transgender comic book in Peru, $2 million for sex change practices in Guatemala, $1.5 million to promote LGBTQ+ in Jamaica, $5.5 million for gender activism in Uganda, $6.3 million for men who have sex with men in South Africa, and $600,000 for family planning in Latin America. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt pulled no punches. The White House Press Secretary pulled no punches. The American people deserve better, she said.
These are some of the insane priorities that organization has been spending money on. $1.5 million to advance DEI in Serbia's workplaces, $70,000 for a production of a DEI musical in Ireland, $47,000 for a transgender opera in Colombia, $32,000 for a transgender comic book in Peru. I don't know about you, but as an American taxpayer, I don't want my dollars going towards this crap, and I know the American people don't either, and that's exactly what Elon Musk has been tasked by President Trump to do.
In fiscal year 2023, USAID managed more than $40 billion in combined appropriations. And in the same year, USAID provided assistance to about 130 countries, of which the top recipients were Ukraine, Ethiopia, Jordan, Congo, Somalia, Yemen, Afghanistan, Nigeria, South Sudan and Syria. Now, even though the naysayers will complain that the United States spends less than 1% of its budget on foreign assistance, the Republicans were quick to bite. Kimberly Classic, who is a former GOP congressional nominee taking a dig at suffering countries, said, "It is time America will step back from being a sugar daddy for other countries." MAGA Representative Mike Collins, taking a jibe at USAID expenditures, joked that he got laid off and was in charge of making the Taliban trance. Sean Hendricks, who works with Mr. Beast, was also not far behind to cut USAID spending down to size. He declared that the aid funding could be the single greatest government corruption story of all time. And last but not the least, American author Ryan James Kidusky, pointing to less informed Americans, made a very valid point. He said about 99% of Americans had no idea what USAID was 30 seconds ago, and if they had known, they'd demand it be closed years ago. Now, after the USAID office was shut this Monday, workers were logged out of their emails and phones. Many feared for their jobs.
And I was sold on the freedoms of America, but after 37 years here, I realized that the freedoms that I was sold on are no longer, especially within the last few days, it has been going away at warp speed. So yeah, I am prepared to leave, and I have been working with my passport because obviously a person with an accent now, you are subjected to possibly ICE wanting to know your status. So I have been working with my passport because it's not the same America I have been living in the last 37 years.
Then Secretary of State Marco Rubio stepped in. He boldly claimed to become the acting USAID director, and he promised change.
I'm the acting director of USAID. I've delegated that authority to someone, but I stay in touch with him. And so the functions of USAID, there are a lot of functions of USAID that are going to continue, that are going to be part of American foreign policy, but it has to be aligned with American foreign policy. And this is not my frustration. This frustration has existed now for almost a quarter century, and multiple administrations that have gone through this challenge. It's going to stop and it's going to end.
Though it is not clear what the Trump administration's timing for the next steps might be, but with protesters raging and billions on hold, America's reputation hangs by a thread. Will USAID rise again, or is this the beginning of its end?
And finally, we attempt to answer the age-old question, cocaine or whiskey? In a live-stream cabinet meeting, Colombian President Gustavo Petro stirred a controversy by claiming that cocaine is banned only because it originates in Latin America. He argued that it is no more harmful than whiskey. Petro further suggested that legalizing the drug globally could dismantle the illicit trade, comparing its potential market to that of wine. The remarks come amid ongoing U.S.-Colombian anti-drug efforts, raising concerns about the future of their long-standing partnership. His statements, which contrast sharply with Colombia's active drug enforcement policies, have sparked internal debate within his administration. Here's more on the Colombian president's comments.
Run for yourself. If you thought whiskey was the bad boy of the party, Colombian President Gustavo Petro is here to set the record straight. Cocaine, according to him, is just harmless. To reiterate again, President Petro called cocaine harmless. The next question that automatically hits the brain is, where did he say this? This happened during a live-streamed cabinet meeting on the 5th of February, which President Petro turned into an unfiltered TED Talk. He boldly claimed that cocaine is banned only because it comes from Latin America and not because it's any worse than a glass of fine scotch. President Petro said, and I quote, "It's forbidden because it's from Latin America, but it's not worse than whiskey." His declaration stunned the cabinet members, who undoubtedly started reconsidering their life choices. The statement made at the Colombian presidential palace has sent political analysts, diplomats, and whiskey enthusiasts into a frenzy. But President Petro didn't stop there. He went full Wolf of Wall Street mode, suggesting that the cocaine industry could be dismantled overnight if the drug was simply legalized and sold like wine. Imagine a future where your local bar offers a Coca and Coke special. Well, in President Petro's mind, that seems to be like a possibility. According to a new survey from the UN Office on Drugs and Crime, the production of coca plants shot up by 10% in 2023, reaching a staggering 253,000 hectares, which is over 625,000 acres. And just to sweeten the deal, potential cocaine production reached 2,664 metric tons. So yeah, that's a 53% increase from the year before. In some coca-growing villages, where pesos are as rare as unicorns, coca base isn't just a byproduct of the drug trade, it's practically the local currency. Who needs cash when you've got a steady supply of the good stuff circulating for all your daily purchases? This off-the-cut comparison couldn't have come at a worse time for US-Colombia relations. The two nations have been staunch allies in the war on drugs. The US has been pouring billions into anti-narcotics operations since the early 2000s. Just recently, a joint effort led to the seizure of 8.2 tons of cocaine at the Buenaventura port in western Colombia. Yet, President Petro seems determined to shake things up. He even took a jab at the United States for its handling of the fentanyl crisis. He pointed fingers at the pharmaceutical companies before sarcastically adding, and I quote, "Now they blame the Mexicans." Of course, the fault lies in the business within their own borders. A bold move, considering that Colombia is still the world's top cocaine producer. Despite these headline-grabbing comments, President Petro's own administration is still cracking down on drug trafficking. So is he advocating for a policy shift, or was this just a moment of radical honesty? President Petro's statement has thrown a Molotov cocktail into Colombia's long-standing drug policy. This raises serious questions about the future of the country's anti-narcotics efforts. Can this be the start of a global movement to rethink drug laws? Either way, if you're planning on unwinding with a drink tonight, you now have a thought-provoking dilemma: whiskey or something stronger?
That's First Post America for this Thursday. I'm Eric Ham signing off from our studios in Washington, D.C. Thanks everyone for tuning in.